Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you're back. Hopefully, you're enjoying the narratives and the videos. I know we've had some technical difficulties. Hopefully, today we won't. So, we've been talking about narrative writing and specifically personal narratives. Yesterday, you listened to a story and you read the narrative, "The Bike" by Gary Soto. And hopefully you saw that he specifically centered his story about one event. It was just after he had learned to ride his bike, and he wasn't supposed to go around the block, wasn't listening to his mom. And that's kind of shows you like that he learned that he should probably trust his mom. He wasn't trusting her before, but if he wasn't trusting her before, he probably learned after the spanking he got that he should trust her now. All right. So, personal narratives, that's what we're going to be doing. And I talked yesterday about the ideas, the organization, the voice, word choice, and mechanics and grammar. We'll be focusing on them as we go through. But right now, we're in the pre-writing stage. So we're going to be focusing on ideas. And you know, from just the authors that we've had come in and visit and assemblies that we've had, they've talked about the writing process, and it's not an easy one. So we've been kind of focusing on pre-writing, what we want our story to be about. And I've been doing the same thing. And actually, over the past couple of days, I think I've changed my idea about what I want to write about. All right. And remember, personal narratives should have a lot of emotion in them. If it doesn't have a wide range of emotion or a twist or a turn in it, your story's going to be flat. It's going to be uninteresting. Your reader's not going to want to read it. Okay. It has to be interesting to more than just you. So we're going to be looking at the rubric, and this will be a good thing for you to glance back at. You really want to try to be in those 3s or 4s. So for the ideas, we specifically want the narrative to focus on one event. And a lot of times other ideas or other things may find their ways into our stories. And we've really talked a lot of this year about staying on topic. All right. The details have to support the lesson that you're trying to learn. If they don't belong in there, then we want to get rid of them. And sometimes our ideas are going to be overarching or too big. And I'm going to try to take you through this and show you this. But this rubric, we may be focusing back on it later. I just thought I'd show you it now. So you could take a look at some of the things. The ideas are what we're focusing on. I'm going to focus on being a 4. So let's go to slide 2. Now, I filled out this slide, and I have to say, I filled it out ahead of time because it took me quite a bit of time to do. So if you're looking at this and you think, it only took her a couple of seconds or minutes, why is it taking me so long? No, I really thought about this, okay? So there's a lot of different ways we're going to look at ideas or lessons that we can talk about for our narrative writing, but it's ultimately going to be up to you, and you want something that's going to be emotional. So we're going to look at it in different ways. All right. So they have some brainstorming sentence starters. I was really excited I had to really think about this because I'm very excitable, if you know me. So I think I was most excited when my children were born. I was inspired I guess my daughter really inspires me because when she was going into high school, she was having problems with her heart. She had to have heart surgery. And it's kind of cool now because she's playing collegiate sports right now with a scholarship, and she's winning many awards. And people might think, I've seen all that she's gone through, how hard she's had to work. So her perseverance and her work ethic has really inspired me. So that's something that I might write about that. I feel like that's more of a specific thing. When my children were born, that's kind of too big. It's too vague. All right. I was helpful when? Well, I think I was most helpful to my brothers and sisters. I grew up in a big family. So lending a hand with our chores. Sometimes we would trade chores. If somebody couldn't do something, you'd help them out, and hopefully they'd help you out at another time. We've helped each other out with relationships, things that were going on in our families. And I have to say, my brothers and sisters have always been there for me. So that, I think, is too big. If I wanted to write about something like that, I'd have to really zone in on probably one specific event. That's too big. I was exhausted when? Well, I can tell you, I remember specifically being so exhausted when my first son was born. We had just moved to Colorado, didn't really have a lot of friends out there. We didn't have any family out there, so we were pretty much on our own. And I went right back to work 3 weeks after he was born, and it was tough. So I was really, really tired. I don't know. I still think it's not real emotional. So, and I know a personal narrative has to be emotional. So looking at this, I might go with the inspiration. I know I have a lesson for that. All right. Then if you go down to the bottom, it says type a lesson you've learned from each person or event below. Now I put, the incident in blue and my lesson that I learned in red. So from a friend, I learned that true friends are always there for you, and you can always count on them if they're really your friends. And I can say that when my parents were dying, or when I've gone through struggles with my parents, or other areas, or where we were facing death, they've always been there for me. All right, a goal you achieved. I think this is a big one, because when I was filling this out, this really hit hard to me. It doesn't matter where you start, it's where you finish, and hard work pays off. And I learned this. I have a specific memory of when I was in college. I was like the first child in my family to go to college. So it was a big deal. And I remember going to my first college class, and we had an assignment, and I failed it miserably. And I remember being so upset and staying after and talking with my professor. And there's a whole lesson to this. So this hit hard home to me. So that is something I might write about. A childhood event. Oh, gosh. Probably something that I really remember is when I cheated in math with a bunch of my friends, and I got caught. They didn't get caught. Well, myself and another one of my friends got caught. The majority of them didn't get caught. And boy, did I learn honesty was the best policy, because Sister Dorothy called my mom, and she called the other person's mom, and they went home. My mom wouldn't let me get on the bus. She told Sister Dorothy to keep me there. And I knew I was in big trouble. And Sister Dorothy was a 90-pound little nun from Malta. And when she saw my mom come in to pick me up and start whacking me all over the place, Sister Dorothy, I think, was more upset that she called my mom than I was. And all the nuns came to our basketball game that night. I think they were trying to see if I was still alive. So that was an incident where I really learned the value of being honesty. A challenging moment. I faced a lot of challenging moments, probably just like you. But I think one that really sticks with me is be careful who you trust, because not everyone is looking out for your best interest. And I tend to have a very open heart. And when I just trust people until they give me reason not to. And that really surprised me that somebody might actually be out to hurt me, not even care about me, just so that they could put themselves ahead. So already I've got some ideas, and like I said, it's changed over the last couple of days. I thought I knew what I wanted to write about, but I'm really focusing in on a lesson learned and emotion. I want to really pay attention to that. All right. Now, this took me a lot of time. So I am not asking you to fill in all of these slides, and you're going to have an additional one, but you really don't need my help for the last one. This one, the graphing, I did the first part of this so you could kind of see how I thought about this. They give you certain ideas to kind of get your mind wandering and or wondering, and good authors do that. They wonder a lot, and I actually went back and I changed this and added things, and you'll see some of these ideas are too big to write a story about. Some of them I would have to really hone in on a specific event. All right, so it talked about times you've moved. So I moved a lot. I've lived in Pennsylvania. Probably our biggest move was when we moved to Colorado, and then maybe 7 years later to Kansas, and then we moved back home to New Jersey. Like I said, I was the first of my siblings and actually my family to go to college. So there's a lot of disappointments, and there's a lot of lessons there that I had. I had moments where I was growing up with my siblings. And I remember babysitting because I was the oldest. I was always babysitting. And we had some pretty funny events when I was babysitting. One was the Tidy Bowl event. There was actually a fire when I was babysitting once. And this wasn't when I was babysitting. My grandfather was babysitting. My brother swallowed a dime, and he picked him up by his leg and started shaking him to get it out. So those are some events maybe I could write about. All right. I also went to a new school, and Sister Dorothy had a big impact on me. She was a great role model for me. She caught me cheating and but really helped me out. So that might be one I write about. I played sports there, and we had several undefeated seasons. That was kind of cool. So, but it wasn't like really emotional, heart wrenching. So I don't know that I could write about that. Events with my grandparents were big. So I thought back to times like that. So learning to tell time with my grandmom. Her name was Agnes. And whenever she babysat, I always found myself in time out, and you had to sit at the kitchen table and you weren't allowed to talk. Well, that was really hard for me. So every time you talked, you got an additional 5 minutes. So I would probably, as soon as my parents left, I'd be at the kitchen table, and I'd open my mouth and say, or try to talk to my grandmother. I'd get additional 5 minutes. So that's how I learned to tell time. Again, it's not really an emotional story, so I don't know that I'd be able to use that. Taking care of my grandmother before she died. She got really sick, and she had to come home and stay with us. And that was very emotional. So that might be something I could write about. Growing up with my grandfather, my grandpop, he had a lot of funny stories. And after my grandmother died, he kind of lived with us. So we have lots of funny stories about him, and donuts and ice cream. I actually lived with him when I was a teenager at the shore. And he died just like days before my wedding. So you see, like, that's too big. If I want to write about my grandfather, I'd have to pick a specific event. It's too big. I lost my engagement ring right after I got engaged. It was before a basketball practice. So I could write about that because that was heart-wrenching. Not as heart-wrenching as some of the other things. And then I was thinking back when like my first years of teaching, I remember finding a coworker unconscious, and I had to do CPR on that person. So that was really emotional. And I put my kind of tried to remember my ages, so I put those in, and then I ranked them. And you can see I ranked finding a coworker unconscious and having to do the CPR on them as the most heart wrenching or most emotional. Um, and then Sister Dorothy, I think I would have probably focused in on the cheating there, because that was a really, really important lesson. And even though it was a long time ago, I still to this day remember that. Um, going to college and learning there, the lessons that I learned, that was important. Taking care of my grandmother. So you can see I rank those. And then after you do that, there's a fourth page, and you can graph those. I'd like you to graph those because I think that would help you visually see, get an idea of what you might want to write about. But keep in mind, when you rank these, you want to be able to pick a specific life event, and you want it to be emotional. You want it to have a swing. Otherwise, you don't want just one emotion throughout your story. You want to have a twist to it, or that roller coaster kind of event, so that you really engage your reader. And you saw how Gary Soto did that with his story, The Bike. It wasn't a flat story. And you want it to be as interesting as you can. And emotion really helps engage your reader. So think about that when you're placing these events on your graph, and you can kind of see that, okay? If you have questions, reach out to me. You know I'm always here for you. I'm very impressed with everything that you've been doing. I've been looking at the work that's been coming in from yesterday. So keep that up. Keep reading. You're doing a great job. Have a good one. Bye-bye.